So do you think it would be helpful? Often there's a bit of a campaign going on about not always saying mum or dad, and actually kind of using the parents' name so that they'd be more acknowledged as not just parents. But do you think, particularly with first-time dads, that it's important to reiterate that they are dad and include them when you're talking to them and using it in that term? Because it's just a bit of a campaign that I've seen going around, where some parents are obviously wanting to be, acknowledged as their name, not as someone's mum. But do you think it would benefit a new dad's mental health to be, dad, it's, in the NICU, it's time to do baby's cares now. Do you want to do it, rather than mum, give her a break kind of thing, and get them included, rather than say, hey, Mark, it's time to do the cares? Do you think it would be better for their mental health?
I think, yeah, same, depends on some dads, and it's worth asking that parent first. Or like I do, would you rather me call you dad or Mark? Like I think my own sales background works well. Before I got into mental health in 2004, and how I like to address people, and I always ask them, would you like to be addressed as dad or Mark? That could be a factor as well, because like I said, but I think fatherhood, we got to, express, fathers, we all have dads, the role of the father as well, celebrate that as well, mention we are fathers, we're dads, we're proud to be dads as well. So I think that's another thing. But I think, yeah, it's always, I know I'm probably say it 2 or 3 times, but I've always been person sent there to find out, how would you like to be acknowledged? Would you like to be acknowledged as dad or Mark, sort of thing, making me feel more comfortable.
No, that's great advice. And then obviously, so some of the babies in the NICU, obviously dads can't hold them and start the bonding process, and obviously that further detaches them, because mum obviously carried them, so they've still got some kind of natural bond going on there, and it's even harder for dad to get involved. And sometimes then baby's breastfeeding, and that's obviously the only time they maybe come out of, say, an incubator, for mum to do that, if they're allowed, if baby's well enough to do that. So how do you think we could better help dads in that situation, where there's even less time to bond?
Yeah, I think it's great to tell a dad that, sometimes it can take a bit longer than some dads, because I know certainly as a new dad myself, I was expecting this overwhelming feeling of love and cut the baby's cord and off you go. And certainly I didn't feel that. I think I was more concerned, obviously, my wife and my son being obviously alive, and all sorts of things at that time. And even things that worried me, like the first time I actually held a little baby in my life, never held a little baby. And all of a sudden I got to take that baby down to get weighed. So you have his thoughts, you're going to drop him, all sorts of things. So we don't talk as dads as well. So I think, like I said, just education is power, as Nelson Mandela said. I think express, it may take a bit of time, but keep at it. Be in tune with the baby, skin to skin, baby massage. Any opportunity to get the mum is breastfeed. You can actually support mum's and be involved in that breastfeeding as well. So that will support mum better as well. So any time, any chance you get, take that opportunity to actually get really involved as well. So I think it's just all about educating all that we know. I wish the things I knew back then, as such, I was only I accidentally did it, really, because my wife was unwell, Michelle was in bed, I was home alone with the baby, I was skin off. I got photos of me with my son on me as the weeks went on, because I was just totally isolated as a new dad, and obviously that grew and grew when I got more time. So yeah, and even things like parental leave, explaining that possibly there could be chances where, I think, flexible working hours, more opportunities to be at home, because 1,001 critical days, as we know, is so important in a child's life. So all these things dads need to be aware of as well. Any opportunity, any dads, just tell them to get in there and just get involved as much as you can. It's hard for some dads, because you can imagine some dads got the intrusive thoughts they're going to do something to the baby. The dads who they've gone through trauma, childhood traumas, all sorts of things as well. So that's why my work is more complex. Mental health, more dads who have struggled for various reasons. So they,
Do you think, Mark, that those that have had trauma and that have struggled as a child, even though they've got no intention of harming their child or doing anything they wouldn't, and it's not who they are, that it makes them more reluctant to seek help when they do start to feel that they're struggling as a new dad, as every dad does, as every new mum does, because it's a complete change to your world. I think that impacts and adds to the stigma and delays them getting help. So like you said, early intervention will, one, save us money, but two, you might not, that dad might just sail away, be a, you know, and not have any troubles, maybe till the teenagers. But you know, but obviously if they've struggled or had a bad time or difficulties in that, it's gonna, doesn't mean that they're a bad parent, but they have the fear to get support and help because of what the stigma might be around it. Do you experience that?
Yeah, I think it could be ranges reason, like you mentioned. It's like Becky, you know, when you think of it, like, you know, if fathers haven't had good experience with social services, you know, those sorts of things could be stopping. I mean, you know, so we know social services are there for families, of course, so they are. And it's just breaking down the myths and all that as well. I think, I like, you got to imagine that some of the fathers I've spoken to over the years, you know, they've, I won't go too much into this, but obviously the childhood traumas they've gone through as well, and now, you know, am I good enough? Am I going to be able to support this baby? And then if it brings a lot of flashbacks to some people who, you know, barfing a baby sometimes for experience they've gone through in childhood for various reasons. So we've got to start looking why a father's behaving during the pregnancy and afterwards as well, the perinatal period. Why have they changed their personalities? Why are they acting like this? And start giving them that support in place. I think that'd be better outcomes, I think, as well, because it could be a range of reasons. Sometimes, like I said, you know, it could be a smell that can trigger off PTSD, anything, you know, it could be loads of factors. So I think, yeah, we need to really look at and educating dads about PTSD, what PTSD. So PTSD is an anxiety disorder, either witnessing or experiencing a life-threatening event. Now, a lot of people associate PTSD, nightmares, flashback. They are, of course, they are some of the symptoms, but we got to remember it's an anxiety disorder. So, like I said, that's very important, that to see specialist support, because sometimes you may need a different treatment to a father or a mother or a parent, I should say, who's gone through depression. So sometimes a more specialist treatment, if that makes sense. Am I allowed to, like EDMR? A lot of people, you know, those sorts of things with PTSD. So which, you know,
That's
can be
the lights, is it, and things like that, the EDMR?
yeah, that's right. When Michelle was actually diagnosed with severe postnatal depression, about when her depression came back after looking after me, obviously she became very unwell again. And then when she did the timeline of trauma, the biggest trauma in her life was the birth experience as well. So a lot of mums are getting diagnosed with postnatal depression. In fact, we got to think, hang on, was it from the symptoms of from the birth trauma, which can overlap and both, etc. So very important to ask about the birth experience in fathers as well, because sometimes the fathers will witness more. Sometimes, you know, the position as well, you know. And communication, it can cause trauma.
Like we mentioned it briefly about like fathers not being able to attend like appointments and stuff, but how do you think like the pandemic has affected fathers and like their mental health, especially if they're first time parents?
I think we've seen a higher increase in antenatal anxiety. I think because of the uncertainty, all things that they were expecting when become dad, and then the family is not there for them, all sorts of support haven't been in place. I think, and the scary part of that is because obviously if dad is suffering from some antenatal anxiety or depression, obviously when the baby comes along, it, you know, obviously that can happen in the, of course, isn't it? But I think the benefits from COVID, dads have been home more, you know, flexible working hours, more engaged, you know, that where they probably would be back in work. I know certainly I benefited from being at home with my son. But the other pressures we talked about, you know, my niece's boyfriend, you know, 2 days in a car park, had to sleep over, you know, just in case he missed the birth, you know, unable to go to the scans. You know, the mums are actually telling us now, look, I've been asked by my mental health. My husband or partner hasn't. And that's having an impact on my mental health. Why ain't he included in these services? So it's actually the mums are really pushing this forward as well now more. And that was the case when I was doing the work with fathers. But going back to the COVID, you know, the pressures are totally different when I was a new dad. Now, even the social media side, you know, all sorts of things. It's different pressures, how the perfect family. But COVID has certainly added to that that fathers have been excluded, and been, as some fathers said, I felt like I was just holding a bag. You know what I mean? And I didn't see my son for 7 days, and all sorts of things I've heard, or which it's not good really when we know, like. But we're in a situation where we weren't expecting this either, and as well, and the pressures. I keep saying the pressures health professionals are on. I worked in hospitals, and we can only do what we can. And if we can just engage dad by a conversation, and if everyone does that, at any point, that alone will have a massive shift throughout maternity services.
So I was thinking a bit, we've talked a lot about first-time dads, haven't we, Lucy? But
Yeah.
I think we had a bit of a question that included kind of thinking about stepdads and taking on those kind of roles and how that can affect your mental health, or even foster dads or dads that adopt and things like that. And maybe what your thoughts are about helping support those. We're thinking even into school nursing here, where we're going to have interactions with them until they're 18, these children, and the children come with the family, and that's not always the car and the mum and the dad and the other child at home situation that is kind of the nuclear family. So kind of what's your ideas on how we manage those situations and support in the right ways, and all those relationships and intricacies that can really affect the entire mental health, and just how dad feels as well in that process?
Absolutely. Do you know, when I explain to my friends, what's post-depression fathers, I say, well, if there was no pregnancy or baby, I wouldn't have been depressed or suicidal thoughts in the postnatal period. So, of course, that can happen to anyone, and this is one of the things we should be talking about, all same gender parents, stepfathers, everyone, every parent should be entitled to the same sort of support, because they'll have far better outcomes for that baby growing up or child. The role of the father, especially in the UK, has changed. Like I mentioned, mum's in Parliament now, dad's at home. In some countries, that is it's not the case. They've got 2 or 3 different fathers, because if one father is higher chance of going to war or lose a life or whatever, then the role is taken over by the stepfather or whatever that father is as well. So father, there's many roles. We don't not just biological. There's stepfathers, adoptive parents, even grandparents have got a massive role to play as well. So I'm not sure if I went off tangent, and did I ask you the question right then?
I think I was thinking along the lines of, say somebody adopted a child, they're 5 years old, but it's their first child. Yes, it's not a birth, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be the equivalent of postnatal depression,
absolutely,
or a traumatic event in the sense of just finding out what that child had gone through to get to 5. Because some isn't a nice story, some is just an unfortunate event where a sad family situation where maybe both parents have passed away and the child's had to be put into care because there's no family left. So it's not always a terrible situation for the child, but obviously that can be quite traumatic. Do you find that the services could be better there to build up that dad relationship at any point when it happens, just like a stepfather coming in and suddenly has 3 kids that they didn't have the day before because they've decided,
Well, your life is never the same when you become a new dad, is it? Or parent, I should say. Your life will never be same. Your social aspects change, your responsibilities change. You're not just looking after your own mental health. Now you've got a baby, or you've got other children to look after as well, and the financial pressures. So there's a range of reasons why fathers can get depressed as new dads or dads. When you look at the research, when you look at non-fathers compared to dads, it's up to, it was, and this has gone even higher, you're 20% more likely to become depressed if you're a father compared to a non-father. And also BMI rates are higher in new dads. The old joke, dad bod and stuff like that. And that's one thing. Fathers, negative coping skills, overeating, all sorts of things it can happen. But so at any stage, even when we talk about, when you mentioned about 5 years age, even now, when my son going for adolescence, now that obviously is an area we don't talk about much as new dads as well. Okay, I got more of an idea about it, obviously adolescence, but we start thinking, when somebody you say, oh, I don't love you anymore, and then you think, overthinking, oh, I don't want to, and then you think, oh, is it me? Anything done? And but that's teenagers sometimes. And he's coming out to it now, thankfully. But yeah, it can happen at any time. And like you said, as a stepfather, obviously there's different pressures there as well, isn't it? I mean, is you're going to get those conversations where you're not my father, or all sorts of things, where they may not be used to those sort of things. So it could be a range of reasons. That's why I'm very person-centered. Is very much, some dads go for situations similar to me, deal with differently. Some dads, that's a good conversation to talk with stepdads. We don't talk with stepdads and adopted parents enough, actually. We don't, and that's something we should be doing.